Hey, Cub fans! Welcome to Cubs 24/7, where Randy talks Cubs. I'm glad you're joining us today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the sounds of the game. And I think the sounds of the game are something that is in baseball that most people really enjoy, but they don't maybe actively think about. And I just want to take some time today and talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about some sounds of the game, some broadcasters in Cub history, and just kind of walk through that. But first, sounds of the game. What am I talking about? Well, if you go to a baseball game, just close your eyes and things that you hear that I think are really neat. The crack of the bat is special. And I've always enjoyed hearing a mitt pop, 95-mile-an-hour fastball, and you hear that mitt pop. You hear vendors in the background, and you hear the crowd mumbling, talking, and then when something happens, you can hear the crescendo, the rise, and just that whole sound of a baseball game going on has always been very enjoyable to me. So let's take that to when you're listening to a game. When I was younger, I had this friend named Chuck Sheets, and Chuck was the one person in my life back in that time who had what we would call electronics. I never had any electronics. I was well into my 20s before I had my first cell phone. I think I might have been in my 30s, but Chuck Sheets in my high school days, mid-late 70s, was he had some electronics. He had a little Game Boy, that little football game where it had three of those dots, and I didn't understand any of it, but Chuck had them. And apparently Chuck had some type of a radio and I never saw the radio, but he had some type of a radio that would pick up stations from all over the country. And Chuck was a big sports fan, and he would listen to games. And then as entertainment, he would replay those to us verbally. So, we'd be on a bus going to a game, and Chuck would regale us with what happened the night before using the voices, and I was just enthralled with it. So not only the sounds of the game, but the sounds of Chuck Sheets imitating the game was something that I gravitated to. And back in those days, I was obviously watching Cub games, but there was 4 other announcers that I really enjoyed. I'll just share those with you. First, Vin Scully, the play-by-play announcer for the Dodgers. For me, phenomenal. Maybe the best that ever did it. I really enjoyed listening to Vin. I like John Miller, the Giants announcer. I loved his voice. I loved his pace. Which is kind of interesting, when you think about what you like and what you don't. And I've always tried to articulate what it is I like about it. And everybody seems to have different things that they like and why. And we'll talk about some of those as we go through the Cubs announcer list here in a little bit. The next announcer that I really enjoy is Mel Allen. Mel Allen was the Yankees broadcaster, and I never really listened to him do Yankee games, but his voice to me is synonymous with a baseball show called This Week in Baseball. And it was on Saturday mornings back in the day, before you got every game every day. This show was the one where you caught up on what happened that week. And Mel Allen narrated that, and he had what was called the TWIB notes, the This Week in Baseball notes, and it just a very iconic sound. And I think the other one for me is Jack Buck. That's Joe Buck's father. Jack was an announcer for the St. Louis Cardinals. And on occasion, I'd be able to pick up the KMOX radio signal out of St. Louis and get to listen to Jack Buck call a game, and I really enjoyed him. So there's 4 announcers that I have some vivid memories about that I think are very entertaining. I think they're probably, they're Hall of Fame guys and very enjoyable. So let's get into some Cub action here. The Cubs have had, let's do approximately 60 people who did announcing over the years. And I have my favorites. I've picked out the ones that I think everybody should know about. And we'll get to those. But the first thing that I have is a little tidbit that I'm guessing most of you aren't aware of. But Ronald Reagan, early in his career, from 1933 to 1936, was doing radio broadcasts of Cub games. Former President Ronald Reagan. And He did a piece with Harry Carey in 1988 throughout the first pitch at Wrigley, up to the booth, and spent the first inning with Harry Carey and Steve Stone. And he actually did a little play-by-play in the bottom of the first. So I'm going to go ahead and put a clip of that in the description so you can check it out. But yeah, Ronald Reagan was a Chicago Cubs broadcaster, early 30s. The first Cub broadcaster that I was aware of was Jack Brickhouse. Jack was he was doing it. He started in 1941. He called Cub games from 41 to 81. So if my math is correct, that's 40 years. So Jack was the broadcaster from my first entrance, right? So he's the first guy, and he is a special place for me. Jack Brickhouse was, I think he was awesome. True Cub fan, passionate Cub fan. Had a lot of catchphrases that I think will illustrate just how passionate he was. But his home run call would be a hey, and that's the reason I do my introductions with hey. That's my tribute to Jack Brickhouse, and I'm going to do it every time. I think it's worthwhile. But Jack would do things like just little things that you knew he wasn't fake. Jack wasn't fake. He wasn't trying to be something he wasn't, and he was a huge Cub fan. And I think maybe Jack Brickhouse was the foundation for why I'm such a huge Cub fan, because when you start and you listen to a guy who is just so joyous about his Cub fandom like Jack Brickhouse was, I think that it has to rub off on you, and I think it probably did. But some of the phrases that Jack would use that I think are just that epitomize his joy was, if the Cubs had won a game and he would sign off into a commercial before they come back and do the stats, he would say, "We'll be right back with the happy totals." And very subtle, but that's just joy. And so he was that way, just fun to listen to, fun as a Cub fan. Now, during that era, 1941 to 1981, and during the era of my first, we'll call it first 20 years of being a Cub fan and watching the Cubs, Jack was on the radio, or the TV, and his counterparts, Vince Lloyd and Lou Boudreau, were doing the radio. Now, back in those days, Lou Boudreau would leave the radio and come in the middle innings and work with Jack for the middle three. So I got a good dose of Jack, Vince Lloyd, and Lou Boudreau. We'll talk Vince Lloyd for a little bit. 1954 to 1986. So that's 32 years. Vince Lloyd called games on the radio for the Cubs. He had a catchphrase, "Holy mackerel." He was a World War II Marine veteran. And his home run call was, "It's a bell ringer." A fan had sent Vince Lloyd and Lou Boudreau a cowbell, and they put it in the booth, and whenever there was a home run hit, they would ring it, and Vince Lloyd would yell, "It's a bell ringer." Lou Boudreau was an interesting guy, too. Lou was a Hall of Fame shortstop, played for Cleveland. He was also a player manager, which we don't see anymore, but Lou Boudreau was a player manager for a full 10 years, so I think that's very unique. And my brother and I do Lou Boudreau impressions all the time, and he had a way of speaking where he tended to leave the S off of the names of players. So we had a player named Gene Clines, and there's another player named a shortstop back in the day named Ivan DeJesus. And my brother and I will do this rendition of Lou Boudreau where he'd say, "Klein goes hard to his right, throws the ball into DeJesus." So it was just very interesting how he did that. And I still use that today. I will sometimes leave off the S of somebody's name with Lou Boudreau's voice in my head. Very, very distinctive voice as well. So I'll leave a video link or a link to a video clip down in the descriptions that you guys can see a little bit of Jack, Vince, and Lou Boudreau. So from that point, Jack Brickhouse left in 1981. So the next phase was Harry Carey. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Harry at some level. As a broadcaster, to me, Harry was bigger than life, almost bigger than the game, if that's possible. And he was a caricature in many ways. Very very fan-friendly, very man of the people. And I'm sure you guys have heard of Harry, known for different things, known for, being a little crazy, but loved like no other, possibly. So I would probably say, some of especially the younger fans, know Harry pretty well. And tremendous. His catchphrases, his home run call was, "It might be, it could be, it is." And I use that one in my head all the time too. Holy cow was a Harry Carey. And the phrase, "Cubs win," which is something that we see written. We see it different places. And I say it all the time. After a Cub game, I'll yell up top to the wife and yell, "Cubs win" at her. So Harry Carey is very special. He teamed up from 1982 to 1987. 82 to 97. He teamed up with Steve Stone, and I like Steve. He was the straight man in the Harry and Steve show, and Steve tells a lot of stories about how he had to kind of help Harry out in some situations, but I thought it was interesting. And my favorite attention getter was when Harry Carey would say, Steve, he would say it like that, and then you have no idea what's coming next. None. So the preface, Steve, you can follow that with any ridiculousn's you want, and it'll fit in. So Harry and Steve Stone. Now Harry left in '97. That was his last year. Harry had a stroke back in the day. Was off for 2 months, I think. Recovered and came back. So 1997 was his last year. And then in 1998, it was kind of really interesting. But his grandson Chip Caray took over. And I really liked Chip. Really enjoyed him. Chip did the games from '98 to '04. And, Harry's son, Chip's dad, was the Braves announcer for years, and he had a very distinct style as well. So his name was Skip Caray. So Skip, Harry's son Skip, the Atlanta broadcaster, and then Skip's son Chip Caray did Cub games from '98 to '04, and I really liked Chip. So from that point, the next group that I want to talk about is the radio guys with Pat Hughes. Pat Hughes is a Hall of Fame broadcaster for the Cubs, and he is still broadcasting. He started in 1996. And my favorite partner of Pat Hughes was Ron Santo. Ron Santo did radio broadcasts from 1990 to 2010. And Ron is a Cub, and obviously a Hall of Fame third baseman for the Cubs. So Ron was my first Cub third baseman. Loved him as a player. Loved him as a broadcaster. Not a polished broadcaster, which made him and Pat a great team. Pat's a polished broadcaster. Very under control, very articulate, very succinct. Has his emotions under control. Sort of the exact opposite of Ron. So the two of them combined was the perfect mix, and I miss Ron. Pat Hughes' partner now is Ron Coomer. Coombs played for the Cubs a handful of years, played for the Yankees, and he's sort of Santo-like, to be honest. He's not to me, this is just my opinion, he's not a polished broadcaster. He stumbles and carries on, but he's a fan. Partner's really nice with Pat Hughes. So I enjoy a Pat Hughes, Ron Coomer broadcast as well. The next broadcaster in the broadcasting team that I think is worthy of note is Len Kasper. Len Kasper broadcast Cub games from 2002 to 2020, and I really liked Len. I really did. Len is he's not Jack, he's not Harry. He's a little bit of Pat Hughes, but with a little more freedom, and he's fun. And I really like Jen. And when JD joined Len in 2013, that combination was really, really good. I really got to to be comfortable with Lynn and JD. And when a Cub game was coming on, I really felt like I got to spend the evening with Lynn and JD. So I really enjoyed them. And Lynn is now the radio broadcaster for the Chicago White Sox, and he left. I was really disappointed in that, to be honest. I really was going to miss Lynn, and I was very upset about that. And he was replaced with John Boog Sciambi, and I'm not sure. I can't remember if I immediately liked Boog. Probably did, but I really like Boog, and the combination of Boog and JD. For me right now, it's probably as good as we have available. I love Jim DeShaze's casual approach. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He pitched 9 or 10 years in the bigs and had a really good career, and but his broadcasts are just very relaxed. He's got humor. He doesn't take himself too seriously. Boog is the same way. Boog is a polished broadcaster, but at the same time, he's kind of just a guy. They're not afraid to just kick back, talk, and it's a very relaxing feel for me. So the idea of being with Boog and JD for Cub games in 2024, I'm very excited about that, and I look forward to it. And Taylor McGregor is to me the main broadcaster down on the field, and I really enjoy Taylor too. So our announcing teams right now of Pat and Coomer on the radio and Boog, JD, and Taylor McGregor, I think are fantastic. Now, that's the group for me. That's the voice of the Cubs. There are some notables that we could sprinkle in that I didn't really think made that list, but did have sort of a small part to play. Tom Brenneman, I thought was pretty good. He was with them from 90 to 95. There's a guy that you may not know, Milo Hamilton. I really enjoyed him, and I think JD partnered with Milo Hamilton back in his days with Houston. But Milo was a Cub announcer from 80 to 84, and I enjoyed him. There was a gentleman by the name of Dwayne Statz from 85 to 89 that I thought was pretty decent. And the color guy that I thought was going to be there for a long time, Bob Brindley, we had him on the TV from 05 to 2012, and he left to go to Arizona and win a World Series. So I guess that's okay. But those are some notables, and 60 others that you could sprinkle in there. So, guys, those are the Cub announcers and just the people who create the sounds of the game for us, and I think it's worthwhile. So again, I will have some links to some of the video clips of these guys. If you want to check it out, you can do that. It's well worthwhile. So I appreciate you joining me today. I appreciate everyone who is enjoying Cubs 24/7. And I look forward to seeing you soon. In the meantime, go Cubs go.